I can't quite put my finger on why I felt this movie was a letdown. One Piece Stampede is the first movie since One Piece 3D to drop the film moniker and focuses on just about every single character we've ever met in this world. Stampede is a celebration, marking the 20th anniversary of the anime, and it definitely feels like a movie made for fans of the series that showcases a lot of what makes it special. Released on August 9th, 2019, this movie premiered during some strange carbonated filler arc that came 5 episodes after Wano started in the anime, while in the manga, the last chapter that released featured Big Mom and Kaido clashing on Onigashima. I started off really enjoying this movie. It just felt right to see all these characters popping up together in the same place, like a little treat for fans that we won't actually get to see in the canon story. However, as things progressed, around the middle is where I became disconnected with the story, which is a shame because I've loved the last few films. To kick things off, I think this movie set the stage for its main villain brilliantly. Much like how Film Z used a shorthand established by the canon series to quickly communicate the threat of the main baddie in the context of other characters, we are introduced to Douglas Bullet during Blackbeard's Impel Down Recruitathon. Even Blackbeard decides to leave Bullet locked away on level 6 because he's too dangerous. Invoking Blackbeard at the start of a movie is always a smart move, and this automatically made the threat of Bullet clear to the audience. Then it jumps ahead to present day, and we see that Bullet has teamed up with Buena Festa, a massive schemer who is somehow going to use a pirate festival to get the One Piece. Boom! Cut to our crew going to the festival, and oh actually, they're already here. Let the opening credits roll. Much like the previous movies, this film does its best to establish the tone it's going for in the opening sequence and title crawl. I think I saw like 50% of every character we've ever met in the credits, which let me know this movie was gonna be packed. The whole festival looked so fun, and honestly, I would have rather spent some more time there rather than combing over it to get straight into the action. It feels like the festival activities and reunions could have made for a great Act 1, especially because where the movie actually starts feels more like Act 2, which lends itself to a pacing problem I feel this movie suffers from. After the setup for this movie, I figured the Marines would be the only characters left out, but right away, we see Smoker and Tashigi. We also jump to see Buggy, Alvida, and Mr. 3 chasing after an injured Law. Right from the jump, this movie is stuffed with a mix of characters who are interacting for the first time. The plot itself really begins with a race to find Roger's treasure that leads up a knock-up stream to an island at the top. Everyone from the worst generation is here. There's also Barto, Cavendish, Wapole, and Foxy. I mean, goddamn, did they go all out? And that's what this film excels at. Just stuffing familiar faces into new situations and seeing how those characters play off each other. This is never clearer than with the worst generation battle royale to get that treasure. It's such a fun experience that was clearly designed to be a fan-pleasing moment because absolutely none of this makes any canonical sense. The movie just wants you to ignore the canon and have a good time. But you know me. My reviews can never ignore where these movies could plausibly take place in the canon timeline. Although, this movie may be the most obviously out of canon since the alternate reality Drum Island movie. Luffy is stated to have a 1.5 billion berry bounty. That places the events of this movie after Whole Cake Island, so I guess you could say this takes place the day before the reverie happens, if we want to concede that Wapole and Jewelry Bonnie can travel at light speed to Mary Joa before it gets started. But let's not kid ourselves. This movie is a clusterfuck of absurdity. Firstly, the Straw Hats are all together, but also Kid, Hawkins, Drake, and Scratchman are all here commanding their own crews, rather than on Wano. None of it makes sense, nor does it pretend to. This is flat out another alternate reality story where somehow the events of this movie could have unfolded, and to be honest, that's fine for a movie like this, which is way more about celebrating the series than telling a thoughtful story. Unsurprisingly, the story is where this movie really fell apart for me. Half the Straw Hats go to help Law investigate something that never even ends up mattering to the plot. Meanwhile, Buggy gets the treasure, the island blows up, then the worst generation has to fight the legendary Super Saiyan, Broly! Oh, sorry. Douglas Bullet. Does Bullet not give anyone else old school Broly vibes? His fight with the worst generation feels like a straight up reskin of Dragon Ball Z Movie 8, which is badass. But much like old school Broly, Bullet suffers from being a flat character with the thinnest motivation possible, who really exists to be buff and punch stuff. He literally just wants to be the strongest in the world. From here, the entire rest of the movie is about stopping him from what? Beating up the entire world? Roger's treasure was an eternal pose to Laugh Tale, essentially a guide to the One Piece, and Bullet calls himself the King of the Pirates. He used to be on Roger's crew, and after Roger died, he went crazy, blah blah blah. It's at this point that the movie truly became uninteresting. The notes I took while watching it dissolved into just writing down what new character popped up next. Crocodile, Fujitora, Morgans, Mihawk, Perona, Hancock, Azaru, Kobe, Lucci, Sakazuki, mandatory Sabo appearance. That's not even naming everyone. The entire middle portion of the story really felt like nothing was happening. The plot came to a standstill once Bullet got huge, and the focus of attention shifted to a big heaping helping of member berries. While I love all those characters, when they just show up for the sake of showing up, it doesn't do anything for me. Mihawk is the worst example of this by far. Literally is there for 2 scenes. He enters the movie, steals Zoro's thunder, and is like, okay, that's all I had to do, goodbye, don't show up at all then. But as I think through this movie, the problem I can't figure out is if the villains ruined it, or if the anniversary celebration ruined the villains. Since this movie is stuffed with great characters from the series, that meant there was a ton of firepower in one place. To contend with that, you need to create a stupid powerful villain, the legendary Super Saiyan Douglas Bullet. The problem with Bullet is he has nothing going on other than being strong. Now, this could just be because the movie didn't have time to flesh him out, because it was so focused on spotlighting its massive cast. We know Bullet has a sad backstory of being this abused military boy who wanted to be tough, but who got smacked down by Roger and grew to respect his captain. This man was a member of Roger's crew, said to be as powerful as Rayleigh. That's interesting. We know from Film Z that the older generation can serve as excellent villains due to their pre-established relationships with characters we already know, as well as their power. The problem is, he just doesn't have an interesting personality. Even his Devil Fruit, with its awakened ability, makes him this massive generic CGI monster that was kind of boring. Especially since we just saw a similar awakened fruit giant villain at the end of the last movie. Not as big, but at a certain point, it doesn't matter. But there's another villain in this movie. Buena Festa, the man behind the scenes who organized this whole festival. He is the mastermind. And so, what if Bullet is just the muscle, as long as Festa is the brains with a brilliant plan? Well, more than halfway through the movie, we finally discover what Festa is after. He claims that Roger launched the ultimate festival with the Great Pirate Era, and so he wants to use Bullet to launch a new era too, so he can best Roger. Oh great! What a completely stupid and lame motivation. He may as well have not even been a character in the movie. He's so superfluous to any of the action outside of just forming the festival at the start. The two villains at the heart of this story are the most two-dimensional since Chopper's Kingdom and the Island of Strange Animals. I think literally every other movie villain are better than these two, which is a shame because I've thought the last few movie villains have been phenomenal standouts. We know the team behind these movies are competent and capable, which leads me to believe they just didn't have the time to flesh out these villains because so much of the movie is focused on, hey, remember him? The final battle comes down to a strange combination of characters that I actually enjoyed seeing matched up, although it felt like there wasn't enough time to spend with this group to really establish an interesting dynamic. There is Law, Smoker, Sabo, Hancock, Buggy, Luffy, and kind of Crocodile and Lucci. They engage in a smackdown to weaken Bullet enough for Luffy to beat him, and then Usopp's plants get in a nice strike on Bullet at the end. I do enjoy the Usopp subplot in this movie. It's small, but he essentially exists to hammer home the friends are strength thematic point. Although, again, this movie boiling down to the power of friends makes it feel even more like the basic early movies of this franchise. At the end, Luffy destroys the log pose, because duh, the Buster Call is called off, and Sabo clears a path for the Straw Hats to escape, alongside a hologram of Ace, so one more character could be squeezed into this movie at the last second. If it sounds like I'm being harsh on this movie, it's because by this point, I just expect more. If this was movie 8, I probably would have been blown away. But since the last few One Piece movies have really stepped up their game, that has raised the bar. Really, Stampede is a victim of Strong World, Z, and Gold successes, which isn't a bad problem to have for the overall franchise. So on the scale of late 2010s out-of-canon anime movies, One Piece Stampede is a 6 out of 10. The movie really shines in its first act, but then spirals into a bland showcase that never lives up to its own potential. Now I want to know what you thought. How does Stampede compare to the other movies for you? Let's talk about it in the comments. Thank you for watching, and special thank you to my patrons who are the type of hardcore people who chug a Coke and then swallow a Mentos. They're not afraid of anything. My next video on One Piece Film Red will be out next week. I hope to see you there, but in the meantime, I'll shut up.